All right, we are back on Get Up here as we approach the bottom of the hour. We do have this breaking news. Brian Windhorst told us to expect to see a bunch of teams re-signing their own guys now that the finals are done, and here's the first of those. According to WOJ, Pascal Siakam intends to sign a 4-year, $189.5 million contract to return to the Pacers. He will sign that deal officially once the free agency moratorium ends on July 6th. Let me get a very quick take from the guys here again. Mad Dog rejoins us for a conversation we'll have in a minute. Indiana had a really nice year. They made a nice playoff run. They lose Halliburton at the end. They wind up getting swept. With Siakam back and another year and all that kind of stuff, are they a legitimate threat to make a deep run, maybe in NBA Finals next year?
I definitely think so. You get the guys back, you get them healthy, and then you also have a guy in Siakam who's been to the championship, and the fast-paced teams who like to run the ball up and down the floor, but you got a guy when you slow it down, you can throw it into him. He's going to be efficient. He's going to get you a bucket. I think they get better next year, but the East also gets better.
Right. So as we sit here right now, Zach, and obviously next year is a very long way off, but we start naming the teams we could see being, the biggest threats to Boston in the East. Should we mention Indiana?
I mean, they just made the conference finals, so we should mention them. I think finals is a stretch when you've got Boston still sitting there.
And who?
And Milwaukee could get better and healthy. Philly could get better and healthy. We'll see how the Knicks, I think, if they just stayed healthy, would probably have beaten Indiana. But this is a very good team. This is a no-brainer. Once you make this trade and you see he fits, this is baked into the trade.
You're going to yell at Stephen A. about this later?
Yeah, we'll probably get into it, and you guys are both right. I don't think Indiana's a finals team. I don't think they're a championship team, but they're a 51, 52-win team, and they could be a game or two against the Celtics. But the Celtics are still the big favorite in the Eastern Conference. There's no question
let's talk about the Celtics. And was this Celtic playoff run dominant, or was it fortunate? Which was those?
Dominant. You got to give credit where credit's due. The numbers speak for themselves. The way they were able to go through losing one game early on and losing one game against Dallas. You can't take anything away from what they're able to do, and the way they dominated through the regular season as well, the 20-point wins and all those numbers you brought up. I'm still in awe of what they were able to do in the regular season. So, dominant.
Validation. I like it. Hey, Zach Lowe, are the Celtics closer to being one and done or being a dynasty?
I think every team in the NBA that wins the championship right now in this environment is closer to being one and done than being a dynasty. That doesn't mean they can't do it. I want them to chase the repeat hard, stated as their goal, lean into it, but I guess I have to go one and done.
Circle that one. I want to come back to that, actually, Artie, our producer today. I want to come back to that because I think there's another interesting question that sort of brings up. But you, D, let me come back to you then. So who's the best player on this team? Is it Brown or is it Tatum?
This is the one I hate. This is the one I hate. This. As a guy who was just recently in the NBA locker rooms and you win a championship, it really doesn't matter. But if I have to pick, I'm going to say the best player is Tatum. The best player is just Jason Tatum, hands down. But the alpha of that team, and there's levels to being an alpha, I think is Jaylen Brown. The way he accepted the matchup to guard Luka, not stop Luka, but pick him up 94 feet, put himself out there and be vulnerable. But Jason Tatum is the best player. Only a few guys that have finished the series 30-10. He's one of them. So you talk about MJ, you talk about Steph, you talk about Walt Frazier, and these guys. So there's only it's few guys that have been able to do that. So he's put himself in the elite company. He is the best player in that.
That's right. And so, look, I think that this is interesting because we've seen how defensive the Celtics have been. A lot of their comments talking about their critics, talking about all the noise that they've heard. Jason Tatum had this tweet yesterday, and I know it's become sort of the fashionable thing to say when you win a championship. What are they going to say now? But there was a tweet that was put up when of all the different accomplishments of this team, including him personally, and he tweeted, what are they going to say now? I guess the question is, was there ever real criticism of him? And if so, was it ever legitimate? Zach?
I think there was real criticism, which sounds a little bit ridiculous because he's been first-team All-NBA 3 years in a row, which means he's been considered one of the 5 guys worthy of that honor. I think people really nitpicked him too much for one series, and it was the 2022 Finals against the Warriors, where he just wasn't good enough as a 24-year-old in the Finals. And they looked at that series, and they completely forgot that this dude saved Boston's season in that same year on the road in Milwaukee, 46 points in a back-to-the-wall Game 6. An all-time great elimination game for the Boston freaking Celtics. And then last season, 51 points in Game 7 against the Sixers. He bizarrely got not enough credit for those games. people questioned his sort of intangibles. Can he take a team across the finish line? This and that. He had already proven that, at least to me. And I think some of the criticism in that sense was a little bit unfair.
Maybe some of the rest of it, and I want to get Dominique in this as well, but UD, without disrespecting the Miami Heat team that I know, remains so near and dear to your heart. I mean, last year, that's a series that most people do not believe the Celtics should have lost. The Heat were a play-in team. The Celtics had home court advantage and were heavily favored to win. Wound up falling down Love 3, then lost Game 7 at home. He's the best player on that team. There was criticism that came from that as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And this is where this year we get to see the growth and the maturation of Jason Tatum, because our focus was to make the game physical, frustrate him, make it more about the refs and more about everything else besides the basketball game. And he was able to fall for that. Jason Tatum does not fall for that anymore. It's about basketball. It's about winning. It's not personal. It's not about anything else but that. The refs can't help you and they can't hurt you. And he's figured that out now. The elite the elite level that he's playing at and the places that he's putting himself, I just said he's in the conversations with Jordan. He's in the conversations with Walt Frazier. He's in the conversations with Steph, the way he finished out that series. He's put himself in those things. So I don't say those. I think the expectations are unrealistic.
Here are the names that you were talking about. It's Frazier.
Yeah, look at that.
Big game James.
Look at that. 30 and 10 and clinching the series win. So when you put yourself in this conversation with these guys and these players, how can you say that, the things that he has are not, earned?
Nick, you're in here with me 2-3 days a week throughout the entire football season, and I feel like in football there's a lot of this for guys who haven't won a championship yet. There's a lot of this for Josh Allen. There's a lot of this for Dak Prescott. There's a lot of this for players who are obviously terrific, but until they get over the top, until we see them at the very end holding up the most important trophy, there are always those questions and always that criticism. So does that end now, in your opinion, for Jason Tatum?
I mean, I think there's a difference between should it end and does it end. I think it probably should end, but I don't think it does end, in part because of the names that Udonis was just naming. Like, he's put himself in that company, so he's going to be compared to them. Like, the criticism of LeBron James still hasn't stopped. People are still comparing him to Jordan and how many championships he has. So Jason Tatum is in that class as far as being a top player on a team that is kind of set up to be a dynasty, whether they become one or not. So right now, the criticism is going to be him getting those next trophies. And I think it's kind of ironic that he did what they're going to say now, because Steph was obviously, it seemed, responding to people saying that he had never won a finals MVP. And that was kind of the last thing that anyone could hold over his head. Jason Tatum hasn't done that yet. So to be clear, I'm not saying that he needs to, but I am saying that people are going to expect that from him. There's going to be one more mountain for him to climb, and I think it's going to be league MVP, it's going to be finals MVP, it's going to be the next measuring stick for Jason Tatum.
First of all, anyone who was holding the lack of a finals MVP over Stephen Curry's head was doing basketball wrong. There was no way to hold that over Stephen Curry's head. And look, I'll say it again. Jason Tatum, to UD's point and Neek's point about the conversations he's in now, the standards he's met for himself and made for himself, they go back to the finals, conference finals next year, and he shoots 35% in the series and goes 0 for 8 in the fourth quarter, by all means, he's going to be subject to the same criticism that LeBron would get if he did that Luka would get if he did that. But make the criticism about the performance, the criticism about what